The internet has brought the armchair sleuth community together much more so than before. In this day and age, armchair detectives are able to hop on various websites and offer their input in unsolved cases. Here are 5 times where these very communities solved cases. Number 5. When 43-year-old Abraham Shakepeare of Lakeland, Florida, won the lottery in 2006, he knew that his life was about to change. However, his life only temporarily changed for the better, and neither his family nor the local community predicted what lay ahead of them. Abraham had struck gold, winning $31 million in the Florida lottery. He was working as a laborer at the time, but after his windfall, he moved himself out to Lakeland, Florida and into a fancy gated community and into a $1 million home. At first, all seemed well. Abraham and his loved ones were living out their dreams, free from financial worry, something that a lot of us strive for. However, things soon began to sour. Friends and acquaintances from the past began calling Abraham and asking him for favors or gifts. He told one of his closest friends, quote, "I've been better off broke. I thought all these people were my friends, then I realized all they want is just money." He soon began to realize that the rekindled relationships were nothing but a front to get a slice of the pie from him. One person in particular stood out, a woman by the name of Doris Donegan, or Dee Dee Moore. She'd set up a business with Abraham in the few months after his lottery winnings, and soon was in control of all of the business's funds. Slowly but surely, Dee Dee began exerting more control over Abraham and began withdrawing money from his account, claiming that it was gifted to her. In November of 2009, Abraham's family filed a missing persons report, claiming that they had not seen or heard from him since April of that year. Now his family claims that they have assumed he's run away to the Caribbean islands to start a new life, and weren't at all suspicious when they hadn't had any contact with him for over 7 months. That's where Web Sleuths steps in. Web Sleuths is a forum-based website where armchair detectives and professional investigators can come together to discuss and sometimes even solve cold cases. The still active thread, called FL Abraham Shakepeare 42 Lottery Winner, April 2009, was started by Kaylin Couture. In her initial post, she runs down the details obtained from a Fox News article relating to Abraham's disappearance. Users quickly began chiming in that the coworker who sued Abraham was a good place to start, as obviously he would have the biggest motive to get rid of him. Attention soon turned to Dee Dee Moore, Abraham's so-called financial advisor. A user by the name of Boy's Mom quoted an article whereby Dee Dee Moore had gained ownership of the company and all of his other investments, such as real estate, with much of it being sold to various medical professionals who worked for Plant City, a company that is owned by Dee Dee Moore. Within this thread, it transpired that Abraham was unable to read or write, and users began fearing that Dee Dee had taken advantage of him. That's when Dee Dee Moore began commenting on the Web Sleuths thread. She claimed that Abraham could sign his own name and that she had nothing to do with his disappearance. The more that Web Sleuth users dug around, the more suspicion grew. Dee Dee claimed she had become involved with Abraham financially, as he was having issues with debts and loan sharks. Police were soon closing in on Moore, and upon further investigation of the home, they uncovered the body of Abraham Shakepeare. A coroner estimated that he'd passed away in April, shortly after his disappearance. Moore was charged with this murder, but claimed that it was in self-defense. Thanks to the Web Sleuth users and the information they uncovered about the transfer of assets to Dee Dee Moore alone, police were able to slowly piece together the investigation. Dee Dee Moore was found guilty in 2012 and sentenced to life without parole. Number 4. The details of this next case are quite sparse, but without the hard work and dedication of one man, this case may have faded into obscurity forever. On March 9, 1988, the remains of a woman between the ages of 20 and 29 was found on the corner of 23rd and Highland in Kansas City, Missouri. The person who discovered the remains was using an empty lot as a dumping ground when they came across a human skull laying amongst the rubbish. Police were immediately called to the scene, and examiners were able to recover the following, including a skull, mandible, humerus, radius, ulna, fibula, clavicle, 6 ribs, tibia, atlas, axis. and other bones, including some teeth. The evidence wasn't an awful lot to work with. It appeared that wildlife had carried off the remains of the woman, and investigators were left with very little. All they know was that the woman was aged between 20 to 29 and was 5'4" with curly brown hair. She was found with a white sock, a red shirt, and a brown leather purse. The investigation quickly ran cold. No one in Kansas City recognized the woman or knew of anyone who was missing and matched her description. In fact, the case went cold until Carl Koppelman stepped in February of 2011. Carl Koppelman is a huge name in the unidentified persons community. He's worked alongside many different agencies voluntarily to create facial estimation sketches of people who are yet to be identified. His contribution cannot be thanked enough, and without him, many families would have been left without answers. In February of 2011, Carl posted the doe's information to the unidentified section of Web Sleuths. He quickly followed up that post, saying he found a missing persons report that had recently been filed that he believed could be the doe. The missing persons report was for a 23-year-old woman named Linda Jane Hart. Hart had gone missing just 7 months before the remains were discovered from Kansas City. Spurred on by other users, Carl phoned the local police department and informed them of the tip. A month or so later, he received a call back from a detective, Tom Hensley, informing him that the dentals were a match and that they were awaiting a DNA sample from Hart's family for further testing. It wasn't until October that Carl finally got the answer. He received an email from Rebecca Roberts of DoeNet, who wrote, "Confirmed through Tom Hensley with the Jackson County Medical Examiner's Office that there was indeed a dental and DNA match." The family was notified on April 11, 2011. Carl updated his post in Web Sleuths with the following information and declared that the thread was now changed to matched. Thanks to Carl and his work, another family has finally found the answers of what happened to their loved one. Number 3. Scrolling through Facebook, you expect to see the usual posts. People posting about their children, current events, or tagging their friends in various memes or pages. However, what you wouldn't expect to see is a post by a supposed contract killer offering his services. The post was made by a man using the name Tony Garcia, although his profile also showed that he went by the nickname of Anthrax. It's unknown exactly how much Anthrax was charging for his services and what the terms and conditions of them were, but his profile did divulge that he was most wanted, and in the section where users can fill out personal and professional information, he wrote, "On the streets, you learn more than in school." The profile had various uploads of gangster-esque photos with quotes alluding to the Hitman lifestyle. Many of the photos included imagery of drugs and weapons and famous cartel members from South America. Whether Anthrax was genuine or not, his Facebook account was certainly set up to make him appear like a fearsome man who should not be messed with. It wasn't long until police partnered with Facebook to hunt down the real man behind this Facebook page. Facebook had received various reports from concerned users about the account and worked with those users to help uncover the man's real identity. After Facebook and vigilant users conducted an investigation, police were able to storm the apartment of Jonathan Giraldo, located in Peru. He was caught in the act of updating his Hitman profile when police stormed in, and was subsequently held on weapons charges. Peruvian police have not released any further details about Anthrax and have not commented on whether he was real or just looking for attention. If they in fact caught a real hitman, the number of lives that have been saved is invaluable, all thanks to a Facebook profile. Number 2. In 2015, a Redditor posted to the legal advice subreddit looking for help. The original post was quite lengthy but provides a vital backstory to the case. A section of the post reads, "When I was a child, my father kidnapped me without knowing. Sometime between the age of 3 and 5, my dad took me, against a court order, away from my mother without me even knowing this. He changed my name and my social security number and did something similar for himself. I've lived my entire life up until a few days ago oblivious to this fact. I only discovered this as I was applying for scholarships and my dad was unable to provide tax info because all of his activity had been fraudulent. I'm a senior in high school and would like to know how I could, if possible, correct my school records with my real name and social security number. so that I might keep the straight A's and high ACT scores that I've worked for the past 3 years. I'm not angry at my father in the slightest. I remember that he used to ask me, if I ever committed a terrible crime, would you still love me? I know my father has dug himself into a deep hole over a decade of fraud and tax evasion. I want to know how I can resolve these problems in the quickest, least painful way possible. I asked one of my school counselors to get me in touch with a lawyer, but I haven't heard from him in a few days. So please, I just need some help. Within a few hours of this post, the subreddit lit up and users were whipped into a frenzy, desperately trying to figure out whether the post was real, and if it was, to figure out the man's identity so that relevant law enforcement agencies could be contacted. The legal advice community turned to the Unresolved Mysteries community and asked for help in identifying the man mentioned in the post. Users from both subreddits rallied together to offer their support and legal advice and helped him piece together his true identity, uncovering things about himself that he didn't even know. After digging through countless articles and scouring the news for information, they came across a CBS article about an 18-year-old boy named Julian Hernandez. It turns out that Julian Hernandez was abducted from Cleveland, Ohio when he was 5 years old. His father had broken a court order, took Julian to Alabama where he changed his identity and created a brand new life for them both. Julian confirmed to law enforcement that he wasn't held against his will and that he was otherwise happy and healthy. It's unknown whether Reddit users tipped off law enforcement or whether the school counselor did. Julian replied to the thread about him on Unresolved Mysteries, saying, "Yes, this is me." So I've deleted that post and the comments that followed it. It doesn't matter though, since it's already been seen. I was really emotional at the time. A lot of things I said in those posts were simply fueled by confusion, anger, rumors, and lies. Please take everything I said with a grain of salt. I don't want any public speaking at the moment. Yet news agencies showed up at my school today and had to be driven home by cops. We then found more news people waiting. I also want to say that some of the things the news agencies have been saying are incorrect. I'll set the record straight when I sort out the rest of my life. Julian's mother and extended family were ecstatic to know that he was still alive and well, although they harbor a lot of anger and resentment towards his father for ruining their lives. Julian's mother told courts how she spent every day at the computer tirelessly searching for any information that would bring her boy home. Bobby Hernandez, who was 53 years old at the time of his 2015 arrest, was sentenced to serve 4 years in prison for the unlawful kidnapping of his son. He also pleaded guilty to charges of interfering with custody, tampering with records, and forgery. Number 1. Our last case was once again solved by web sleuths. Without the tireless work of volunteers and professionals who visit the site, a lot of families would be left without closure. In May of 2006, a thread was created on web sleuths detailing the disappearance of 25-year-old Paulette Jester. In her early years, Paulette had been a bright and attentive student at the Davidson High School in Michigan. She was in line to become a homecoming queen and was one of the best athletes in her school's history. However, almost overnight, her family saw a change in Paulette, and it wasn't positive. 2 years before her disappearance, her family petitioned to have her committed to a state hospital due to concerns for her mental well-being. Paulette was subsequently diagnosed with schizophrenia and tried her best to lead a normal life and a fulfilling one. Paulette Jester left her home on May 12, 1979, walking out the door with no more than an army backpack while wearing jeans and a turquoise ring that she treasured dearly. Her last known movements are towards the I-69. After that, the trail goes somewhat cold. Her social security number was last used in 1980 in Arizona, and contact with her slowly fizzled out. An attentive user picked up on Paulette's physical description and commented that she could possibly be a woman who had been involved in a fatal hit-and-run accident in Houston, Texas on March 28, 1980. Texan authorities were at a dead end, and soon the case went cold. They discovered that the Jane Doe found in March of 1980 had no dentals, DNA samples, or fingerprints to aid in her identification. All they had to work with were old autopsy photos. Web sleuth users noticed that both Jane Doe and Paulette had 3 distinctive freckles on their cheek. This tip was then passed on to Sharon Derrick, a forensic anthropologist based in Houston, Texas. She examined the photographs and reached out to Paulette's family for further confirmation. and that's when a positive identification was made. The Jane Doe found in 1980 was identified by the 3 freckles on her cheek. Thanks to these 3 freckles and attentive web sleuthers, Paulette Jester was able to reclaim her name. Paulette's sister, Peg, gave the following statements to the San Antonio Express News in 2014. She said, quote, "As you can imagine, there was a mixture of sadness because she was dead and that was finally confirmed. Sadness because it was a hit and run. Sadness because she'd been without a name for so long. And at the same time, we were thankful we finally had the truth, that we found her and knew what happened." Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.